People still don't know the real reason. Maybe it's time I told them.
You heard that right. Michael Jordan isn't just looking back. He's pulling back the curtain on one of the most heated rivalries the NBA has ever seen. Today we're diving deep into the real reason MJ never liked Isiah Thomas. From the bruising playoff battles that left Jordan sprawled on the hardwood, to that infamous walk-off that froze their relationship in time, to the Dream Team snub that still lingers over Thomas's legacy. This story has layers. And if you think it all came down to a few hard fouls, think again. Jordan's influence went beyond the court, and he used it to keep Thomas from one of the biggest moments of his career. This beef ran deeper than most people ever realized. To truly understand why Jordan and Thomas never got along, you can't start with handshakes or Olympic drama. You've got to go back to the late 80s when the rivalry was forged in pain and pride. Picture this. Jordan drives the lane, soaring toward the rim for one of those signature mid-air finishes that defined him, and then boom. Bill Laimbeer slams his shoulder into Jordan's chest like a linebacker. MJ crashes to the floor, the crowd gasps. But the Pistons bench? They're loving it, because this wasn't just rough basketball. It was strategy. It was what Detroit called the Jordan rules.
It's the Jordan rules, and it was that simple.
What happens when he does make this time?
That's when Laimbeer and Mahorn would go.
Oh yeah, Detroit really had a playbook for one man, Michael Jordan. And the rules? Brutally simple. Hit him again. And if he gets up, hit him harder. That was the entire strategy. This wasn't just tough defense, it was psychological warfare. Years later, even Pistons assistant coach Brendan Malone came clean about it. The Jordan rules weren't just a nickname, they were real. And they were designed to break MJ down physically and mentally.
As a defender, your job is to take away his...
They weren't just trying to guard Jordan, they wanted to break him. Mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever it took. And this is where Isiah Thomas steps into the picture. He wasn't just some bystander watching his enforcers go wild. He was the commander of the bad boys. The scrappy kid from Chicago who grew up to lead Detroit's most feared team. To Thomas, those hits weren't cheap shots, they were chess moves. Calculated. Controlled. Strategic. Don't just take my word for it, the proof's right here.
You describe the way you felt then and feel now about having been the bad boys.
Oh yeah, take out his right hand. That was the actual game plan. You got that brutal, now put that next to MJ. Jordan was the rising superstar, the NBA's golden ticket after Magic and Bird. His entire game was built on flair, dominance, and humiliation. He didn't just beat you, he made sure you remembered it, usually by dunking on your center for the exclamation point. So imagine how it felt when every drive to the rim turned into a wrestling match. The league was hyping Jordan as the future, while Detroit was treating him like a crash test dummy. And right in the middle of it all, Isiah Thomas, smiling as his teammates dropped elbows like it was part of the playbook. That's where the resentment started to boil. Because this wasn't just about hard fouls, it was about status. Jordan saw himself as the chosen heir to the NBA throne, the man who would take basketball global. Thomas saw himself as the overlooked underdog, the guy who already built something in Detroit, only to watch the league's spotlight shift to the new superstar from Chicago. And year after year, those playoff battles turned into something way bigger than basketball. It became war, a war that defined the rise of Michael Jordan.
With the fucking basket, put him on the ground. When he comes to the basket, he ain't gonna dunk. We're gonna hit you, and you're gonna be on the ground.
Jordan is still there.
We tried to physically hurt him.
By the late 80s, the Pistons had already built their identity. They weren't called the bad boys just because it sounded cool, they earned that name every single night. Elbows, shoves, hard fouls, intimidation was their signature. Step into the lane and you were going to feel it, and no one took more of that punishment than Michael Jordan. Go back to 1988, the Eastern Conference semifinals, Chicago versus Detroit. Jordan was on another level, dropping absurd numbers. 36.3 points, 7 rebounds, nearly 5 assists a game. He was unstoppable, or so it seemed. But Detroit figured it out fast. Their defense swarmed him, hit him, and kept hitting until he couldn't get free. And they weren't bluffing about it either. In an interview years later, Dennis Rodman flat out admitted it. That was the plan all along.
I think the crowd is cheering here for the Bulls right now, and the Pistons as they leave the court.
I don't think they're cheering for the Bulls, but I think the greeting is for the Pistons.
By 1989, the rivalry had crossed the line. This wasn't competition anymore. It was hostility. Chicago wasn't that young, scrappy squad from a few years back. Jordan had Scottie Pippen rising into stardom, Horace Grant adding muscle inside, and the Bulls finally looked ready to steal the East from Detroit. The Eastern Conference Finals went the distance, 7 brutal games? And right in the middle of it, Jordan unleashed one of his nastiest performances. Game 3. Jordan went nuclear, 46 points on Detroit. He shredded double teams, attacked the rim, and hit mid-range shots that sent Chicago into chaos. The Bulls stole that one 99-97, and for a brief moment, it felt like the balance of power was about to shift. But the Pistons had a weapon uglier than talent: the Jordan rules. That '89 series turned into a war zone. Jordan drove into the paint, Laimbeer waited like a bouncer, and Rodman grabbed him midair. Every possession was punishment. Then came Game 7. Fate twisted the knife. Pippen was crippled by a migraine. 1 for 10 from the floor, barely able to see the rim. Jordan fought alone, trapped and swarmed till the clock ran out. Detroit won 93-74. The Pistons advanced and Jordan walked off humiliated. And if you think Detroit felt any sympathy, think again. Isiah Thomas and his crew, that wasn't cruelty, it was toughness. Chicago wasn't unlucky. They were soft. Then came 1990. Another year, another Eastern Conference Finals, another shot at revenge. Why now? Jordan's disgust was plain, but the Pistons didn't blink. He still went off, averaging 32 a game, but this wasn't one man versus a team, it was one man versus a system. Detroit's defense wore him down like body shots in a heavyweight fight. Game 7. Same story. Detroit closed it out, punched another ticket to the finals. Why then? The East was painted in blood, and Detroit was the gatekeeper. The Celtics were fading, the Lakers aging, and the Pistons had claimed the throne, dragging opponents through the mud to get there. Everyone, including Jordan, knew the price of admission. So when 1991 rolled around, it wasn't just another rematch. It was the final act in a grudge built on pain, humiliation, and payback. And this time, the story flipped. The Bulls weren't knocking on the door, they kicked it down. Chicago didn't just beat Detroit, they swept them. 4 straight. No migraines, no excuses, and no more Jordan rules. Now it was the Bulls who were physical, relentless, and hungry. The Pistons looked old, tired, and out of answers. Game after game, Jordan carved them apart. Nearly 30 a night, controlling every possession. When Detroit tried to rough him up, he bounced back. When they collapsed, he found Pippen or Grant slicing to the rim. By Game 4, the Pistons weren't just beaten, they were broken. And that's when the moment came, the one that froze this rivalry in NBA history forever.
Shook my hand when he won, but when I did the sweeping, he disappeared like a coward.
With seconds still left on the clock, Isiah Thomas rose from the bench, gave a quick nod, and led his team straight off the court. No handshakes, no congratulations, not even a glance toward the Bulls. Just a cold, silent walk into the tunnel. Bill Laimbeer followed. Then Rodman. One by one, the bad boys disappeared, ghosting Chicago in their biggest moment of triumph. But this wasn't just a sore loser move. This was the breaking point. Because to Jordan, it wasn't about sportsmanship, it was personal. He didn't just see disrespect, he saw betrayal. And if there's one thing you never do, it's cross Michael Jordan's pride.
You can show me anything you want. There's no way you can convince me he wasn't an asshole.
Rivalries are supposed to get ugly, that's part of the game. But this was different. Walking off without a handshake wasn't just poor sportsmanship. It was the ultimate insult in basketball, maybe in all of sports. Everyone in that arena felt it. The cameras caught Jordan's reaction instantly. At first he looked stunned. Then you could see it, that slow burn behind his eyes. The Pistons had spent 3 years beating him down, and now that he'd finally taken them out, they couldn't give him the simplest thing, respect. Years later, when The Last Dance aired, that wound was still wide open. As soon as the footage rolled, you could see the anger come right back. Jordan didn't even try to hide it. He flat out called Isiah Thomas an expletive on camera.
When Larry Bird exited, we never looked back and said, oh, they were poor sports, they were bad champions. We were actually grateful of the lessons that they had taught us along the way.
And this wasn't 1991, not the heat of battle, not raw emotion talking. This was 2020, nearly 3 decades later. That's how deep the scar went. Jordan wasn't just remembering history, he was reliving it. Meanwhile, Thomas tried to defend himself. He claimed it wasn't that serious, that the Celtics had done the same thing to Detroit years earlier, so why should anyone care? But that excuse didn't land. Not with Jordan. Not with the fans. Because this time, the moment was caught in crystal clear HD. The faces, the walk-off, the disrespect. And once it was out there was no spinning it.
Me to ask me to bluff. Rob phone call to Rob. I won't play with Isiah Thomas on the team. He assured me, he said, you know what? Chuck that boy, Isiah. So Isiah's not going to be a part of the team.
But let's be real, this wasn't about tradition. It was pure bitterness. That single gesture froze their relationship in time. Jordan went on to win championships, global fame, and the undisputed throne of basketball. But when it came to Isiah Thomas, the respect was gone, for good. And no matter how many times their paths crossed, that walk-off was always there, an open wound that never healed. And if you thought that handshake snub was petty, just wait for what came next. Because in 1992, the US assembled what's still considered the greatest basketball roster ever, the Dream Team: Jordan, Magic, Bird, Barkley, Malone, Stockton. Ewing.it was basketball's version of the Avengers. They didn't just win gold in Barcelona, they turned basketball into a global phenomenon. Every kid outside the US who fell in love with the NBA in the 90s probably started with that team. Now here's where it gets messy. On paper, there was one name that should have been a lock. Isiah Thomas. 2 rings. Multiple All-Star selections. Finals MVP. He was the leader of the only team that had knocked Jordan off the throne in his prime. By resume alone, he deserved a spot more than most. But when the final roster dropped, Thomas's name was nowhere. To put that in perspective, Stockton made it. Clyde Drexler made it. Even Christian Leitner, still in college, made it. But Isiah? He was watching from home. 4 years, the whispers never stopped. People said the same thing over and over. Michael Jordan was behind it.
And yeah, he carries even to this day.
The story goes that when Team USA's selection committee started building the roster, Jordan laid down his terms, flat out: if Thomas is in, I'm out. That was the price. And nobody was going to risk the Dream Team without Michael Jordan. Not when he was the reigning MVP, finals hero, and the global face of basketball. The politics weren't subtle either. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird both had history with Thomas, and not all of it friendly. The NBA back then was way more personal than people realize. Locker room grudges, bruised egos, and respect carried as much weight as stats. So while Magic and Bird still made the cut, Thomas didn't. Between Jordan's influence and the cold shoulders from other stars, the committee's choice became easy and brutal. Think about what that meant. This was the moment in basketball history, the kind of spotlight that cements a legacy forever. Everyone who wore that 1992 Team USA jersey became immortal. Everyone, except Isiah Thomas. For him, it wasn't just missing a tournament, it was being erased from the biggest chapter in the game's storybook. And the fallout followed him for the rest of his career. Every documentary, every highlight reel, every Dream Team montage, he's not there. No matter what he accomplished with the Pistons, that snub left a permanent gap on his resume. Even now, people still debate it. Not whether Thomas was good enough, that's never in question, but whether he was liked enough. Whether he was too toxic, too divisive, too hated by the very players he should have stood beside as equals. And that's the real heartbreak for Thomas. That it wasn't that he wasn't great enough, it's that his peers chose to shut him out. For Jordan, though, the snub was the ultimate revenge. The Pistons had blocked him from the finals for 3 straight years, mocked him, beat him down, and walked off without a handshake. Now the power had flipped, and he used it in the coldest way possible. You'd think with time the fire would fade. But decades later, Jordan lit the fuse again. For years, the Bulls-Pistons feud lived in old NBA debates, something fans remembered but rarely revisited. Then 2020 hit. The world was locked down. ESPN dropped The Last Dance. And suddenly that rivalry was back on center stage, louder, meaner, rawer than ever. Jordan didn't hold back. Sitting in front of the camera, glass of whiskey in hand, he said it plain: no filters, no PR.